Three. Hello and welcome everyone to another video conversation on Awaz-e-Haqiqat that stands for the voice of truth. I'm your host, Chris Malika-Bhadra, and depending on whichever part of the world you're watching us from, as you can see, I'm joined by a very elite panel. This is the core team that forms part of the Shekhawati Project. Before I introduce the Shekhawati Project and the team to all of you and the interesting discussion we're going to be having with them, I would like to start this discussion by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm meeting them. I'm coming from Melbourne, so I acknowledge the land of the Clean Nation, and I would also like to pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. As I mentioned, the Shekhawati Project was born in January 2016 in Fatehpur, India, to preserve the cultural heritage of Shekhawati. After discovering the painted monuments of the region, their goal is to establish a protocol which follows both the modern rules of conservation and the ancient fresco methods so that it can be passed on to other people who are concerned about preserving the painted monuments of Shekhawati. The ancient fresco techniques and the material used in havelis and chhatris represent a unique know-how, the conservation of which is essential to the preservation of Indian heritage. And now on to this panel. Cécile is the founder of TSP, French-American Conservation and Restoration Expert. She's based in Paris. She's a graduate of the École du Louvre, Paris, and Master in Cultural Conservation Restoration and University of Paris. Cécile heads many restoration sites worldwide with more than 30 years of experience. Thank you for joining me, Cécile.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.
It's a pleasure. Giovanna is a co-founder and committee member of TSP. She is an Italian painting conservator experienced in Italian frescoes technique. She graduated at Scuola di Restauro of Cremona. Sorry, Giovanna, if I mispronounced it incorrectly. She owns an MD in art history at the University of La Sapienza in Rome and the University of Paris Sorbonne. She worked as a conservator for numerous sites in Rome, Florence, Vatican City, and in Paris for more than 15 years. Thank you for joining us tonight, Giovanna.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Sabine is a committee member of TSP as well. She is a French-Australian private conservator based in Melbourne since 2001. She holds conservation degrees from Institut National du Patrimoine, ICROM, and a PhD from University of Melbourne, which led to the book Mirka Mora, A Life-Making Art, published by Thames and Hudson, Australia in 2019. She's led several workshops in the Himalayan region for UNESCO, ICROM, and private NGOs, focusing on training local people in conservation and in disaster recovery. Thank you for joining us, Sabine.
Thank you for having us.
Harpreet is an Indian-born Italian art conservator from Punjab. She is a co-founder and technical director at Delta Conservation based in Melbourne. She specializes in the conservation of wall paintings, stone, stucco decorations, and built heritage with over 15 years of working experience across Europe, Asia, and Australia on frescoes, murals, collections, and heritage-listed buildings. Good evening, Harpreet. Thank you for joining me again.
Good evening, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Shravani is a conservation architect based in India with over 6 years of experience specializing in architectural restoration, structural conservation, adaptive reuse design, and urban heritage. Originally from Hyderabad, India, she's worked on a diverse range of projects across cities like Chennai, Visakhapatnam, Bangalore, and Gujarat. Good evening, Shravani. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And last but not least, Khushbu holds a Bachelor of Architecture and is currently employed as a junior architect at an architectural firm in Noida, India. Thank you for joining us, Khushbu. All right. So the first question to my group is, when was the Shekhawati Project founded and what was the initial vision behind this project? Cécile, can I please start with you and then I'll move around the table.
Well, I think the initial project was to try to restore the Le Prince Haveli because I had contact with Nadine Le Prince, who had been there already for 20 years. And as an artist, she fell in love with the paintings of Shekhawati.
Yeah.
And further on, she decided to buy a Haveli in Shekhawati. When the laws in India permitted foreigners to buy places. But I think that this law only lasted for 2 years. So she was able to buy this Haveli, beautiful, in Fatehpur. That was not a very touristic town, but she decided that she had to really restore it, and she restored it with local artisans. And the problem was that a few years later, it already started really falling apart, and especially the paintings. The paintings, I think they were restored with local pigments, and as soon as there was the monsoon, they were not preserved. So she asked me to come over to Fatehpur to see what I could do with her private house. And so I went there with Giovanna, and when we saw the quantity of paintings and the condition they were in, we thought, well, this is absolutely gigantic, and it's the whole region that is in this condition. So we thought maybe what we can do is start some international workshops with students and try to put together I would say the know-how of the Indian tradition with the masons and also the students who are studying different conservation programs in Indian universities, and to work also with international students from mostly Europe. And later on, I met Sabine. I knew that she was working in Melbourne, and she was very interested and decided also to come with some of her students. And this is where Sabine and Harpreet, who came from Italy, very early on, Harpreet started her first internship, and this, I think, was in 2017. And this is how Harpreet got very involved into the project. And then the second year, Harpreet maybe was more, I would say, you know, she got more and more involved into the project until she started also writing about the project.
Right. Thanks, Cécile. Sabine, I'll come to you. How did your vision align with the project's vision when you started or when you joined the team?
What I was interested in is really the blending of different traditions, different vision of authenticity, notably of the ways of seeing conservation, which is a profession with ethics, but ethics are codified mainly the text that we are used and we taught with in our European curriculums are mainly European text, and the vision of conservation is quite different in Asia and in other cultures as well. And I thought that was quite interesting and a great opportunity for everyone to blend together these two things. And so the students would learn a lot from each other, and we would have some really good discussion, which we did, and voilà, come up with some interesting solutions.
Right. Thanks, Sabine. Giovanna, moving on to yourself. When you initially joined in, as Cécile mentioned, how did your vision align with the project's vision? Giovanna, you're muted.
Sorry, you mean, sorry, can you tell again, because I didn't get you very well.
How did your vision, when you went with Cécile, how did your vision align with hers and towards the project mainly?
Yeah. Let's say that as Cécile said at the very beginning, was very we were very impressed by the beauty and special really the special setup of this beautiful houses that was so full of art and frescoes. So for us was very difficult to try to find the good way to put together something like a protocol that could be useful, following some direction for conservation, keeping obviously in mind that we were in a place that had special problem for climate, for organization. And so we were trying to focus on a way that in a microcosm, like taking care of a little part of the Prince Avali artwork, we could set up a kind of protocol that could be useful for a larger point of view, And we must say that we were very lucky to be helped also from other companies. For example, the supplies company that was an Italian company that was has a place also in Delhi, was very helping us because they allowed us to try materials. Also, for us was a very different climate, a place, so we have to put together to adapt the protocol that we're used to use for this special let's say intervention, and so we were testing material and trying to put together something that could be functioning, and was a very, very good way for us to have people coming from different experience, like from Italy, from India, from France, from Australia, because everybody was putting together his own experience, and we had the great privilege to exchange together and put together the good protocol.
Okay. Thanks, Giovanna. Harpreet, I'll come to you next. You've been associated with this project for quite some time, right? But when you initially joined, as Cécile mentioned, same question. What was your vision and how did it align with TSP?
Well, when I first joined and did the internship in Fatehpur, I was still a student. I was a master's student in conservation of material in Switzerland. And I have to say that I was born in India, but I had never gone back to India, and for very different reasons. And when I arrived in India and I saw these majestic, beautiful wall paintings in Shekhawati, I sort of, my personal and professional life, became all together. And I found that both these parts of myself could meet in Shekhawati. So I was absolutely conquered by the beauty of it. And I thought this was a great opportunity to study the materials, the regional materials in terms of the pigments and how the craftsmen, they were, making all these beautiful wall paintings. And yeah, I was absolutely stunned by the beauty and how this overall the state of deterioration that they were in. So in alongside Cécile, Giovanna, and Sabine, and all this international group, we were trying actually to understand how to conserve them. And so for me, it was about the union of personal and professional lives, and this brought me to India, and it kept me connected to the Shekhawati project, and it is still like that. I'm connected professionally and personally because of me being Indian and a wall painting conservator.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful story, bringing a professional person together for good causes. And now I'll move on to the young ladies here. Khushbu, same question. What was your vision and how did it align with the broader team and their vision for TSP?
When actually I applied for this internship, I was actually working as a freelancer with a conservation architect. So she actually told me that this internship is going in, why don't you try it out? So I let's say, okay, architecture is not just about the building, but also the materials and the facade, and every element compiles down to the architecture. So I was just inclined and went to the internship. And there's this, the other side. We in architecture we generally deal with the building itself and the space, but then it's just the skin of the architecture, like the facade I was working on, the team was working on, and I was a new image, a new perspective I could see that, oh, this part, even the skin of the building is such important, and these people are dealing it with so delicacy and giving it so much attention and trying to preserve this, this loads of history. That was I was very moved, kind of, I should say. So that was interesting, and it was interesting to see how they were doing the materials and how they were conserving it, preserving it. That was very interesting and a new thing to me as an architect.
Thank you, Kushbu. And last but not the least, for Shravani, your vision and the alignment with TSP. You're muted, Shravani.
Sorry for
Always
that.
happens, always.
I did my internship in 2020.
Mm.
So by that time, I started working as a conservation architect in Vizag. So I was working on two projects. I got to know about TSP from my mentor in Sydney. So he sent me the link and he said they're doing wall painting, conservation. It's interesting. So I went there, and for me, as a architectural conservationist, so I've always looked at buildings, and this wall paintings is just a decoration. So I always thought, okay, preserving a building is more important than wall paintings or decorative units. But then, since I worked there for 3 months, that changed my perspective, because even those wall paintings have a story to say. And
Mm.
it's very important to preserve that story. And it's not a small feat what they do or what I've learned.
Yeah.
So for me, that changed a lot. And from then on, whenever I see a building, I look at the wall paintings or whatever the decorative units as an important element. So that changed for me.
Good. Thank you. All right. This you just said the kind of ball rolling for the TSP. How was it founded? Frescoes, conservation, mainly. So I'm going to juggle around my questions a bit. And the next question I want to kind of seek answers to is, the role of climate change. You deny or accept it's climate change is happening, but how does it impact your roles in the course of action that you have decided to preserve art in public spaces? This time, I think, Sabine, I'll start with yourself, if that's okay.
Okay. I think it comes to an aspect of conservation which is maybe less known or less advertised, which is preventive conservation. So our role is just to picture what will happen, the consequences of climate change and of not caring for the heritage in general, but this is accelerated by climate change. And once you've understood the phenomenon of how the degradation occurs and what accelerates it, it's much easier then to find ways to prevent it, not completely to stop it, but at least to reduce it. So this is a big part of what we're doing. And the fact that we did work sites on scaffold and in the cities, that is a bit the public face, so that draws attention to what we're doing. And then we can have more discussions with the people, the owner of the building and the people who pass around and own similar buildings, and explain to them what climate change and what the weather and everything are doing to their buildings and what could be steps to reduce that.
Thank you, Sabine. Cécile, what are your thoughts on climate change and the steps that you guys take to preserve public art? I mean, art in public space.
Well, I think that it's interesting to preserve, to have this example, because when it was, the COVID time, the Haveli was completely empty and nobody was taking care of it. I'm talking about the Le Prince Haveli. I think the Gulab Haveli in Mandawa, the owner, came, even though he had no travelers, but he came and still tried to keep it up. But the Haveli Le Prince was really left abandoned. And that was terrible because Mr. Cadieu and Nadine Le Prince, they came back after 3 years. And it was really, really terrible. It's some kind of places that need to be kept up day after day. And you have to be present because, you have to build some walls to preserve, when it's the monsoon, the water to come into the houses. And I think that it's a very good thing that we were doing this example to try to work on site, even during some very harsh climates. And I think that's the only way to do it, is to be there and to work, knowing that at any time in the year there's a possibility of having so much water, because the water goes into the first courtyard and then it goes up and it ruins the base of the paintings and the base, of course, of the buildings. So that's what I think. I think it's an, I mean, I think Giovanna also has other ideas about this because of what UNESCO did in Venice to preserve the water coming into the heritage buildings.
Right. Giovanna, your thoughts on climate change affecting art in public areas?
Let's say that the Shekhawati region, that area of the world, has already very extreme weather manifestation because there is a monsoon, is very special climate. And also, without considering climate change, we were faced to very different weather conditions. We have to deal with the very strong heat, with the monsoon, so the water, and then also this very humid period that allowed then a very hot and dry time. So the frescoes are very much concerned by this big change, and climate change create an extreme manifestation of those kind of climate. So for us, it was already difficult to deal. We had to, for example, for consolidation, we had to find out some solution that was taking care of this extreme different condition that was during the year. So we took a lot of data during a long time from one workshop to the other to have data that could cover all the year and allowed us to have more skills and tools to choose the right material. But it's clear, as Cécile said, is a big deal, is a big problem in the region, also compared to the kind of artwork we were faced with.
Thanks, Giovanna. Shravani, what are your thoughts on climate change's role in art preservation?
I think in India we have extreme climates. Like for example, in Mahabalipuram there is wonderful sculptures which are there. The only thing they could do is preventive conservation, because even the UNESCO says that they're going to disappear at some point of time because they're not conserved properly, and they're also exposed to the harsh winds and everything. So they need to be maintained properly, and conservation should be happening. Even in Shekhawati, I think because they have extreme climates, maintenance should happen every 6 months or every 1 year.
All right. Thank you, Shravani. Khushbu, your thoughts, because you both are currently in the same geographical area. How does climate change play out? Khushbu, you're muted.
Yeah, so I was saying, as everyone said, we have actually pretty harsh temperatures, and especially in Rajasthan, even in summers, it goes like very high to let's say 46 or 47 degrees, but in the night, the temperature drops down in the summers as well. So the same season has that, high and the low mercury as well. So it is very difficult for not me being the conservationist, but seeing the other people. It's a hard task to grab on, this thing and how to deal with it. And on top of that, we have climate change. So it is difficult. And the thing is that the solution is not just we found one and you can deal with it. No, because of the change, the solution needs to be changed. And as Cécile said, you have to be there to get a hold on it. So that's what I feel.
Thank you, Khushbu. And finally, Harpreet, how does climate change play out?
Well, as everybody said, I think climate change is one of the biggest enemy, especially in this case in the Shekhawati. And every year, for example, we have talking about the Prince Haveli in Fatehpur. During the monsoon season, so all the bottom part of the Havelis until up to a height of 1 meter or 1.5 meter, it would be flooded. So you would have no more water, but also polluted water coming out from the town, going on the top of these buildings. So the plaster gets damaged. all this brick structure and stone structure is, soaks up and it sucks all this polluted water. And over time, of course, the plaster is going to come off, it's going to exfoliate, it's going to detach from the walls. So, and apart from the water, if we are talking about the external wall paintings, the strong sun radiation is very harmful for the organic pigments being used, right, on the wall. And if the gutters are not properly maintained, all that waterfall is gonna damage the top part of the building. So it is, there is, as Kuzbusha, there is not one thing to do. Like every year you need to be there, first of all, to check what is going on the property or on a larger part of the town. And depending on the problem, you need to find suitable solution which can be suitable for like one building and not for the other one, because one building probably is, flooded, so it has water infiltration or like rising damp issue, while the other building is suffering more from a very strong visible light, strong sunlight. So you have to be there. You need to, use the method of preventative conservation. So do like a suitable program on what has to be checked, when that has to be, maintained and fixed. And that is, I think, the only way to preserve all this like immense heritage present in heritage, and not just so in Shekhawati, and not just in Shekhawati.
I think it's applicable everywhere we have a rich legacy and heritage. But what I've heard from all of you is that we need to be present there. It needs to be a routine maintenance, and you have a SOP in place. But, climate change is often debatable. From that segue, my next question would be that, are there any ethical or legal concerns when it comes to art conservation in particular? This time, Harpreet, I'll start with you and then I'll move around the table.
So ethical reasons, yeah. So in India, I think, as Sabine mentioned before, some of the tradition of conservation, they are a little bit different from the European countries. So in Europe, of course, if you have you are in archaeological context and some of the elements are missing, depending on, of course, the stakeholders, the decision can be to preserve whatever is left or to reduce some of the areas. While in India, depending again whether you're in a religious context or private context, there is that tradition of like, redoing a lacking part. So if like a part of wall painting has fallen, the tradition is to redo it, because you need to maintain that skill set, which is the local craftsmanship. So there is a sort of like a change in the ethics, which applies, I think, separately, depending on whether you are in Asia, specifically in Shekhawati in this context, or in Europe. And so we have had interesting debates, I think, with the students and the professors in Shekhawati, where European students coming from Italy instead of, France or Bern would debate with the Indian students on, okay, how would you, do this? What is, which values come into it? So what is significance? Materials is significant because of its material characteristics, or the image is significant. So how do you reinstate the image? Would you reinstate the image, or would you preserve the material? Because that is important.
No, thanks, Harpreet. Cecile, I'll come to you. In your experience, what are some of the are there any ethical concerns when you talk about art conservation?
Yes, I think that in Europe, ethical concerns are, the three bases of our deontology, which is, first of all, reversible. Like everything that we use on the painting must be reversible at any time. If it doesn't it doesn't age the same way, we have to be able to remove it. You see, like if we do, we're going to restore a missing part and we're going to do some retouching. If this retouching will age differently, we want to be able to take it off over time, because we want to preserve, first of all, the original painting and not repaint over it. The main thing is to give value to the original paint, which
Right.
is very different, as Harpreet just said, in Asia. So
Mm.
this is the first thing. The second thing is every material and product that we use, we want them to be compatible with the original materials. So that is another thing. Compatible means that there's not going to be any chemical reaction
Yes.
to the original. And so I think that, of course, the view in what we call authenticity is something that is very, very old in our mind, which means that we want to conserve the material, as Harpreet said. And it doesn't matter if the aesthetic is gone in a way. We also want the aesthetic, but if we have a missing part, like on an Italian fresco, I would say, let's say, take Botticelli, and there's a big missing part, a lacuna, we could accept to have a missing part, even if it's in a face, even if it's a hand that's missing, like it's in a Greek sculpture who has no more arm. That is not a problem. And I think that in Asia, that is a big problem because the aesthetic is maybe more important, and also the know-how, because I think the notion of losing a part of a painting, it doesn't really matter in their mind in Asia, because the most important is to preserve the know-how and to know how to do it again, even if it's new. So I don't know if you agree with me. But yes, I think, for us, the most important in Europe is the preservation of the original.
Thank you, Cécile. Khushboo, I'll move on to you. From South Asian perspective, what can be some of the ethical concerns when we talk about art conservation?
How should I put it? Like me being an architect and looking from the outsider point of view, so there are ethical concerns. But as like Harpreet and Cécile said, when we were like working in Shekhawati, and for the second maybe Bandava we were working, so they got their local craftsmen and we had our team. So the thing was, what I compared and jotted down some points
Yeah.
which I felt that they were not actually into the material, but they wanted the paintings to be there, not what they were made of. And that kind of material you don't see nowadays. When we were retouching the paintings, the paints they used, the colors they were used, when we were just cleaning them, they were just, as they used to be like the original one. Like I found this a very beautiful blue color, and when we cleaned it, it like shined like a gemstone. So that sort of sensitivity towards the material that local craftsmen don't have. They are into maybe the painting and the craft, but not exactly towards the material. The inclination is not towards that.
Right.
So then coming down to the preservation, so they're more into preserving the art of paintings, not the material itself.
Right.
So this is what I think. Yeah.
So thank you. Giovanna, what are your thoughts? You're hearing both sides of the conversation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Khushboo touched a very important point because we can see two different layers of ethical concern. Will be an historical one, and from the historical point of view of the history of those buildings and their paintings and their techniques. So as Khushboo said, also we have the same experience under some in paint. We find out cleaning the original material that was very shining, as the blue she mentioned, which was very different from the one that we saw before the cleaning. And that allowed us also to understand from an aesthetical point of view an ancient result, but also the constitution of materials and techniques, ancient techniques. And but it's true, as Harpreet and Cécile said, that the concern of the iconography and the aesthetical point of view in Asia could be different from what we learn as a authenticity that we have to preserve, because it still maintain a very strong meaning, even if it's not the original, is what we see that become very important. So for us, we were facing this duality in some way. So was very interesting to debate between us to try to understand how we could preserve the materiality and the historical side with the meaning and the iconography for the local people and for this specific place.
Right. Thanks,
which could be different.
Of course. Sabine, your thoughts?
Oh, I think it's been quite covered, but I think what I would like to add is it's not either or. You can do, buildings are big and there is a lot there. These are very vast programs. It's not like it's one single panel painting that we consider in its unicity. These are big programs, big decorative programs. They were made to impress people. People know more or less the iconography because it's repeated on other buildings and with, of course, some variations. And we had to consider that as well. And we worked in some areas while there were some painters, because in Asia, conservation is also conserving the skills, as has been said already. And these people have the skills. And in some areas, for example, in the courtyard just behind us, which was very, very damaged, then what was left, but what was missing, like sometimes several square meters, was redone by the painters. So you can have both approaches in the same building. Main thing is really to talk to each other and to consider things on a case by case.
Thank you, Sabine. And finally, to you, Shravani, you've heard everyone on so many points under one broad umbrella. What are your thoughts to add on to that?
I would like to bring in a private client perspective from what I've worked for in India. So what happens is the conservation is a relatively new topic that is still being talked about in India. It's not as vast as or as discussed as in Europe. So when you go to a private client, they usually want it to be brand new. They don't understand the idea of restoration. They would say, if I'm spending this much money, I would rather take it down and have it a new wall painting or a new thing. I have had discussions with clients like that, and they're very for them the idea of conservation is monetary. So they would say, I'm spending this much money, I would rather get it new rather than conserving it. Labor and Haveli, because Nadine is interested in conservation, that was a very different case together. But then there are a lot of Havelis which are turning into heritage properties, and they wanted it to be repainted or done like that. So I think there is an ethical conflict there. What you have to do, or what is the right thing to do? What does the client wants? How do you deal with the client? So that is a whole different topic to this. Yeah,
that's a whole different. When finances come, it's a whole different conversation. I don't think I'll be able to have time, but maybe some other time we'll have a Pandora's box that's open. But what I'm understanding from all of you is this art conversation is not a one-way road. Like, you have many stakeholders, right? You have your clients, you have probably councils, governments, whatnot. On the broader level, if we consider all of them together, how does the project include that social involvement and, more importantly, the interest of the youth toward art and culture? Probably, as Shravani mentioned, that modern things are coming up in place of whatever was there previously. How do you see that involvement and youth engagement from the project? Who do I start with first? Joanna, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, this is a very important point, but what personally I felt, but I think is sharing with the other participant of the project, is that it's a matter very much of generation, because for older generation has a more traditional point of view. So of this preservation was very much on having redone and nice and enjoyable, like in a way new, and using material that wasn't very expensive to be able also, because we have to consider, as Sabine said, that we are talking about big buildings with a lot of square meter of artwork. So we have absolutely to deal with the expenses of this conservation intervention. And the new generation, they are more educated to conservation, so they have another attitude to this. So the youth, I will say two things for the youth participation of the project. First of all, is this new approach. So taking this new way to preserve, and to preserve the historical side, the material side, to want to understand the story and the material and everything, and put together those new way to preserve a building and a place like this. And also this opportunity for young people to exchange with other professionals and interact with artisans, with scientists, engineering, architecture, so can have a more complete view and become to a protocol with more skills and a different attitude.
Thanks, Joanna. Thank you.
For sure.
Sabine, what are your thoughts?
It's me, yeah?
Yeah.
I think one of my, we wanted two things, but Cécile will probably talk about that. I think is we wanted to involve young people to show that there is a career to be had in conservation, and particularly young women. But Cécile will expand on that more, I'm sure. What I really noted was that was really a two-way learning thing. I've learned a lot of things when I went there. And I learned the perspective from a different culture, from a different way of considering the use as well. I mean, these buildings are not museums, they're just buildings which are used. So they need not only to look good, but they need to be functional. And this has to come into play as well. And I think students learned as well that, or I hope they did, that there is not one way, one recipe for everything. There is not one person who knows. It's just something which has to be discussed, and perspective can be different, but if you're polite, respectful, you just find a way in the middle to do things. And that was, I think, a big learning curve for everyone.
Absolutely. I think it's an ongoing discussion to be had. Shravani, what are your thoughts on an ongoing discussion?
So when I did my internship, there were people from different parts of the world, and also in India, there are people from different backgrounds. Like that is an art conservator from France, and then that is a painting conservator from Vatican City, and then another Indian who worked with me. So she did not have any background in architecture, so she did in social sciences. So for me, it was very interesting when people who did not know anything about it, even I did not know anything about wall painting conservation. So coming there and doing work on the Haveli and on the facade, and having those discussions in the evening, it's very interesting to see different perspectives of what they think about it. And also when you're retouching, how much you should do or how much you should not do. That's a very interesting debate we had.
Right.
So I've learned a lot through this internship program.
Amazing. Thank you, Shravani. Harpreet.
Well, I think it's very important to tell stories. It's very important to educate people. So the best way to start is like tell with a story. And it's important to tell story about the houses to the people that live in those houses, because that's what I've seen that it happens in Fatehpur. For example, we would work on the facade and there would be the scaffold and many people would pass by under us, and they would look at us and they would ask questions, and they would know, they sometimes wouldn't know about the iconography because they pass, you know, in front of these buildings so many times that they just look at them, but they don't know what is happening with the materials that, you know, they are made with. So talking about iconography and how some of the most beautiful and important festivals are depicted on these wall paintings and how they're made, and telling them, telling how they are important to the community. I think people understand if you approach them and you like willing to share your time and your knowledge with them, because then they feed back their perspective and their point of view to you as well. So I think with the elder generation, we saw that you need to really talk to them respectfully and politely, and then there is a certain interaction, maybe not straight away, because they already have have had a long life, so they have their certain, like, you know, perspectives, prejudices, but slowly after a while with dialogue and communication, we were able to see interaction, connection, and by the end of the workshop, people would just ask questions. They would be, you know, cheerful. They would ask whether we need a child on the scaffold and how the work was going. While on the other side, younger generation in India, they are so bright, so intelligent, so receptive. And we had brilliant students like Shervani and Kushbu, with whom you know, we had the opportunity to talk and interact. You talk to them and you start conversation, and they learn so quick and fast, and they feed us back with their own perspective. So it has been quite an excellent interchange and exchange of ideas, I would say.
Thanks. I totally agree with that. The dialogue has to be there for whatever cause you're standing up for. Kushbu, when you were a part of the communication, how do you think youth engagement and awareness is important?
Actually, the work culture, first of all, the work culture, I should appreciate how these people were working. So we used to get up in the morning, breakfast, all done, and then we were all set on the scaffolding. Then it's like what we have is like hierarchy in our working field. So the seniors have separate sort of, you know, job, and the juniors have separate sort of job. But here, the seniors and juniors, everybody, I would say, Cecile and Joanna are like, you know, the professor levels, and we were the students. They all were, you know, getting on one scaffolding and chatting and engaging and joking and working at the same time. So it was like, you know, so joyful at the same time, but more importantly, learning on how things were happening, and especially me being an Indian and part of you know, my country is having such diverse heritage. So it was also new to me. The first time I was, you know, introduced to wall paintings as an architect. It was a different sort of something I learned, and as an individual as well. And as Harpreet said, people did used to come, and it was, you know, we were working on the scaffolding, and people used to come, tourists also used to come, and they were like, you know, oh, okay, this was also this sort of thing to be done, and this is also the heritage we own. So it was on the giving part, we were like showing them to the, you know, the local people, especially they are living around, as Harpreet put it, but they do not realize the heritage they hold, the importance in the value. And so it was like opening a window to them. So this is what you have, and you need to, you know, preserve this. This is what I.
Thank you, Phoebe. This is something I also learned when I came here 12 years ago for my PhD. Like my supervisor, everyone is on the same level. And I think that is how we learn. So a huge credit to all our seniors who did not make us feel intimidated. So thank you. Cecile, I intentionally wanted to come to you last for this question, because as someone who's seen this vision through and through, how do you think TSP has helped in youth involvement, awareness, and engagement?
Oh, well, I think it was a fascinating experience, and the exchange between, you know, universities, students in universities in India and in Europe and in Australia is so rich. And I think that putting everybody together on one work site during a long period, because we would work for, you know, a month or 2 months or even 3 months. And that is the only way really to get into the project and to exchange, because you can work all day long together on the walls, and then you can exchange in the evening, and then you start again in the morning. It's really a teamwork. And I think that is very rich. And I think everybody learned a lot, and we would love to continue.
Thanks, Cécile. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And there's just one thing I wanted to say that we didn't talk about. I think it's very important to consider the funds, and that is one of our big problems. We were not able to raise enough funds, and so who is paying for these restorations? Because you see, there is, I know, one region in the south of India, in Tamil Nadu, I don't remember the name, but there's many heritage buildings and havelis that are not painted the same way as in Shekhawati, but they're preserved by UNESCO. And so even if they're privately owned, the owners get some funds from the government. And so I think that is very different, because if you get some funds from the government, you can consider restoring really, and not really repainting. You're maybe more okay to do the work.
Yeah.
You see, and so it's true that in Europe, and especially France, Italy, we have the historical monuments, that is an institution of the government that will give some funds to private owners to do this kind of work.
Thanks, Cécile. I think through the conversation, the funds is a very important aspect, because what Shravani mentioned earlier, that people are going for modernization, hotels and privileged stays and whatnot. And what you're mentioning is also very important, that why not keep the original as is with supported funds? If ever time permits, is again probably part 2 of the conversation, but tonight I'm just mindful of time. One last question to my panel here. If you could provide one-liner message to all our viewers and audiences on whatever you want it to be, what would be your message? This time I'll start with Khushbu.
Oh, okay. So I would suggest all the youth from different backgrounds, especially architectural, because being an architect, I would ask the students, the teachers, the professors, everybody in the line, and even the people in other backgrounds, to definitely come and explore and see these heritage buildings, and what people are doing to preserve them, and efforts to preserve them, because at last it's not the heritage just for them, but it is also ours, a collective sort of. But on a broader picture, we people live on earth, so it belongs to us, not just from this country, for everybody. It's a responsibility as well to preserve this, because this what tells what we were and what we are.
Beautiful.
So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sabine.
Oh, I would join that and say, probably to people living in the region, look at it, enjoy it, and celebrate it, and do what's needed to do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabine. Shravani.
I wish to see India in a place where conservation is more talked about, and especially when you do conservation, like in Sydney, when I've done my internship, when a building is conserved, people communities are involved and they talk to the communities. So I wish your people and the artisans and everybody are involved in the process, because even if it's a private or a public enterprise, heritage is a story that is collectively told by everybody. So even the community is involved. So I hope that everybody travel through that journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shravani. Giovanna.
I totally share what everybody just said, and I will say same thing, and to be very proud to everybody for this beautiful heritage, and really try to be aware of this, which is a big opportunity for sharing, for also celebrate the history, the tradition, and the skills of this region, like all India, obviously, but really to enjoy, and maybe to create a little space to know more about the story, the historical side, so to be really able to give value to this and be part of this project of conservation for next generation.
Wonderful, Joanna. Harpreet?
I would say, yes, be proud of the heritage and the buildings that you're living in. And if you see a damage, don't ignore it, first of all, really acknowledge it, and try to talk to people who can collaboratively work to restore it. And restoration, of course, it requires works and funding, but if you have the right mindset, you can go and source out that funding. So just keep in mind that preservation is not just for others, it's mostly for you and your family and your grandchildren. It's for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Cécile.
Oh, what you want me to answer? I find that everybody, I agree with everybody. I think that we should never, abandon. We should continue, and I hope that we can organize another workshop, maybe in the fall or next winter. And restoring is an ongoing project. You should never stop. It has to be redone all the time. And so even though it's maybe sometimes depressing because Haveli de Prince has been very ruined again after our restoration, we should keep it up. We should continue. And we have to be there. That's what I think.
Thank you, Cécile. Thank you. Thank you to everyone on the panel. So for our viewers, this was the team behind the Shekhawati project. What they have mentioned so far, every word stands true when you talk about art conservation. You have to be there. You have to be passionate about storytelling through art. You have to make sure your art and culture is preserved for yourself, your family, and the next generation to come. It's yours. Just own it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me on this important panel discussion. We are coming through different time zones, so I wanted to stretch it, but maybe next time, just being very considerate about everyone. It was an absolute honor speaking with all of you. So thank you so very much for speaking with me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.